All right. Hello, everyone who's watching the recording. This is Point Contact presentation on September the 6th, Saturday at 1900 hours UTC. This week we've been listening to another one from the classic lecture series. This one was Disc 10, Identifying Changing Values. As we've just listened to that, made some notes, we'll go into that in a sec, but before we do, we'll just go through and have a general introduction, say hi to everyone. We'll go alphabetically. If you guys can work out where you'd be, that would be good. It'll basically be left to right on the bottom, but you'll need to figure out where you fit in for everyone. So I start because I'm Aidan. I'm Aidan. I'm point of contact for the UK. Have been around now for about 6 months or something. Hosting some nice hangout, which is cool, fun, and exciting. I work on the mobile development team, and I work on the UK activism team. And generally that's me. So next in my list is Gabriel.
Yeah, I'm Gabriel. I've been around for about a year, I guess. Trying to get a TVP or similar team going here in Utah. I'm currently going to school for sociology and volunteering around the city.
Mari?
Yeah, hello, my name is Maru, and my fascination with the Fitness Project is with education. I'm really passionate about all of the books on the recommended reading list. I basically own them all and I read them, and I'm trying to work my way so I don't need to reflect back to the books all the time. So I've got that as a working memory, and I'll be able to discuss, teach, or find myself in that arena.
Michael?
Oh, hey, sorry, I was reading something. Hey, I'm Michael, Los Angeles. What's up?
Cool, and then Richard and Will.
Who was that was talking before Michael? Was that Maru or?
Yes, that's me, Maru.
Oh, okay. You're from where again? I'm sorry, I have to write this down.
As New Zealand, Aotearoa.
New Zealand. Is there an Old Zealand?
I think it's just Zealand and the UK and Britain.
Okay.
We're colonized by the British.
Okay. Okay, Richard here from Brazil, retired engineer. About probably 8 months into TVP. Learning every day.
Thanks, Richard.
Hi, my name is Will. Some of you know me already. I'm been following TVP for about a year and a half now, but I've only become involved in about the past 6 months.
Where are you from?
I'm from North Carolina, USA.
Nice. Right, thanks everyone for coming and being with us today. Nice to see the newish faces and small faces. I know I haven't been around particularly all the time, so you might have been around for a while, Will and Richard. I think this is the first time I've seen you guys. Well, I might have seen you. Anyway, sorry.
Aidan, you're breaking up a lot.
I'm sorry, my internet is sometimes poor like this.
I don't know if you're clicking on something and then causing your feedback to cut you out.
Hopefully this will be better. Or worse. Can you hear me at all now?
Yeah, we give a count, 1, 2, 3, I don't know.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Okay. Okay.
That's a bit better.
Okay. Well, sorry if I'm breaking up. If I'm getting worse, just let me know. I can switch onto my phone. Normally I have more luck, but then I can't see the chat box, which is a shame.
Okay.
Okay, so going into the question sheet. The first one we had is one that I... oh no, Gabriel, your question has just appeared, so you can go first.
I guess I had forgotten to hit enter. I just liked that he mentioned that you can't grow up with a brotherly attitude that most Christians advocate without a definite definition of that. You can't just go around saying, oh, you should be like this, you should be generous, you should be brotherly, without actually enumerating what that means in day-to-day life. Because then you just are just throwing around bullshit words.
Yeah, so figuring out like a definition of brotherly, I guess. Is that
Yeah, like, does it mean have to assist them in, or, like, just what does it mean to be brotherly?
Very vague. No, that bit was a little bit confusing for me. I'm not sure I can like talk about it too much. I don't really have a question about it either, if you know what I mean. Does anyone else have something to add to this?
Yeah. I guess it's also kind of related to when you're saying somebody works hard or has character. That doesn't really mean anything specific. So, in the case of brotherly, I guess, would you say that we're being brotherly right now since we're like connecting with people around the world?
The problem with definitions is they're all subjective. I mean, some brothers fight all the time. I mean, some brothers get along. I mean, if what they mean is people getting along, that's the definition you want, or, you know, recognizing that we are all in fact kind of related in terms of, you know, what we're all made of and where we all come from and all that, you know, how similar we all are. Then I think that's, you know, if you want to call it a definition, it's more like an understanding.
Yeah, that's good. I just wonder, like, say, you know, going around saying, you know, you want to raise people to be brotherly. Isn't it kind of like good and bad? As in, that by saying that, you also think that there's an opposite side, and kind of in the way that he said, you know, where the priest said to the girl, you know, aren't you such a pretty girl? If you're encouraging people to be brotherly, then does that cause like this kind of negative as well? Is that what? Because that's what I thought he was trying to get with that, and maybe I misheard wrong.
Yeah, using the word brotherly implies that some people aren't brotherly, and so that kind of makes it easier to think that like people that aren't of your faith are not brotherly because you're trying to raise your followers to be a certain way. Yeah.
Yeah, that could be super.
Sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
You first.
I was just going to say, what about women? Can women be brotherly? It seems like kind of a primitive, limited interpretation of just, I don't know, people getting along. Is that what we're trying to get at? Or
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that the word brotherly also has a different connotation for everyone because everyone would treat their brother differently based on their early experiences.
So I guess I don't think he said it in this video, but he said in a number of videos calling for the brotherhood of man. I'm not sure whether that's really what Jacques is saying. Was it saying, you know, people like of you think in brotherly forms want to talk like that, but so is that kind of like phrase or ideal not really what we're going for then? Or is it, are we just saying it's too vague at the moment to really kind of push the idea of a brotherhood of man?
Well, it's fine. It's just, it's really what we're implying or what we're getting at is people getting along, whether you call it brotherly or whatever. And what causes that? It's, again, shared information, resources, and an abundance of both of those, enough so that everyone has what they need and not, you know, it's a more equal distribution of those things. Yeah, that's where I guess the notion brotherly comes from. It's, you know, equality is in there, things like that. So creating the environment that produces those values or behaviors or whatever you want to call it is why we're all here.
Yeah. I think so. Someone asked a question earlier, which was, "Are we being brotherly here, being, you know, international stuff?" And to me, it seems more along the lines of extensionality, which is another word Jack talks about, and maybe is more kind of relevant than the idea of brotherly. To see everyone as extensional to each other, even if, like, you know, I've never met some guy from China, but he's extensional to me. As everyone from China is extensional to me because we all live in this closed kind of system, or kind of closed system, which is the Earth, and we're all interlinked. So, kind of pushing that idea, I think, I don't know, for me, I'd go along the lines of extensionality rather than brotherly. But again, we're probably just getting into semantics.
Like you could, has anybody else read that book, Stranger in a Strange Land?
Yes, I love that one.
Well, yeah, well, in the book, I've read it a few times, and they're brotherly, they call them Brahmins. You know how the Indian castes have got Brahmins, and a Brahmin is like a certain caste of an Indian yogi, and who is a superior caste of human. Like in heaps of civilizations have had, and cultures have had similar people. But in the Stranger in a Strange Land, their brethren is like they've got this brotherly love they share, and like the more in their secret society you become, the inner circles you become. Like it's like an onion, it's got different layers of circles that you're initiated into, and as you go more and more into the inner circles of the secret society, they stop wearing clothes, and like my wife now I'll share with you because you're a part of the inner circle, because that's sharing the love. So of course you'd have to put definitions on what the semantic meaning is. So I prefer what you said, Aidan, is extensionality, where we are passionate about a certain direction. We might have different resources and different ideas that we can share and then work towards going there. That doesn't mean I need to share my wife with you to be moving in that direction, unless it's agreed upon policy that we've all agreed upon.
Yeah, it is a better word, I feel, because it's less gender biased, or more gender neutral, I suppose, and more, I guess, explicit in what it's implying, or in its meaning.
Yeah, it doesn't also bring up connotations like when I say, "Oh, I've just joined this new cult." Like a lot of people will be concerned and think, "Oh no, you've joined a brainwashing cult. Yeah, I feel sorry for you." But like, if we say like the humanity of the brethren of humanity or the brothers, or it suddenly like fits straight into like I think of all the delinquent teenagers who are like quite aggressive and violent, and that they'll be thinking, "Oh, what gang's the brothers in?" So it could be kind of like, not saying everybody in society, that's just the lowest people in society would think like that, but I'm thinking that our society, well, the country I live in anyway, where it's quite a masculine country in the sense that men are kind of like looked upon as a bit superior. Not that it's real, but just, you know, it's a man's world, and barbecues and beer and just an old case. And when I mentioned before the brethren from India, the Brahmins, like, so the brethren, Brahmin, it always got this old semantic connotation from history. When the extensionality, when I mention that to a lot of people, they have to say, what is that? So, and I think that's important, because if you're introducing a new direction, it's good to make them say, what is that? Instead of going, oh, that's like the Indian case system, isn't it? No, it's not like that. That's why we're using extensionality. So to make the what is that? Because they can look it up on the dictionary. It's a real word, and it's got specific meanings, and you can kind of relate it into what you're talking with them about.
Yeah, and really it's kind of at the heart of all of our relationships. They're all varying degrees of extensionality, from your family members and friends to your enemies or whatever, if you have them, or coworkers or whatever they are to you. They're just varying degrees of extensional. It's a good word. And it's cool because you can increase it. You can increase your extensionality and other people's extensionality to you by learning more. At least that's what I found, right?
Very much. It's interesting. Like, school is a tool for making people extensional for the current system, and like you can use the word in lots of different ways. It's very, very cool way to explain those.
I've heard another phrase that kind of, I think, implies the same physical events or phenomena or whatever, called a sphere of influence. Well, a sphere of influence that again can grow depending on what we know and our tools and information.
Well, yeah, I think I guess, I don't know, I have a feeling in that video that Jacques more aiming at how to talk to Christians, if you know what I mean. Well, especially in that kind of whole bit about talking about brotherly and things, trying to get them to explain what they mean. So it kind of is a case of talking to the audience at their time.
It's difficult too. I'm sure it is for some of those people and for anyone else too, because at one point he said something about, he was talking about corruption, and he said technically there's no such thing, technically everyone's operating, according to whatever, and then, but later he said, yeah, people are corrupt, and so it seems probably contradictory to some people, but really it's kind of true depending on your perspective and, again, understanding the definition of corruption.
Very much. There is a bit of, if you're not thinking about it properly in these things, Jack kind of does seem to contradict himself. Like the one, sorry, I'm talking generally about these bigger things, but the one that's called Problems of a Scientific Attitude, whereas on all the other ones he's like, yeah, scientific attitude, and like in that one it says there's no such thing. But it's very interesting, and yeah, just kind of shows how language is poor, not necessarily.
Yeah, it's probably very frustrating for people who, either are out of context or jump in the middle of something without any other reference.
All right. So have we got anything else on brotherly? Anyone? Right. Okay. So the next question was question point. One that I said. You actually kind of mentioned this rather quickly. I thought more of this video would be kind of about explaining this idea, which is, so Jacques did the example where he grew the plant and then it died, and it basically broke his set of what it was going to do, because his set doesn't actually really reality doesn't respect the set that we all have in our brains. And that's kind of where a lot of problems comes in for people and things. So I guess the thing is that it seems to me like we're trying to manage and change our sets, our expectations. I don't know. This is called he calls it a number of things: a set, a value system, sometimes expectations. So all that kind of stuff. I think basically it's changing our model of reality to be as close to reality as possible, so that we don't hurt ourselves by walking around with these broken value systems. And so, well, it's either we're trying to do that, or we are trying to do that, or do we also kind of keep in mind that our values and expectations are wrong, and so when we come into things where we see expectations as being wrong, we don't get kind of hung up on it and get annoyed and angry and all that kind of stuff. That's not really a question, more of a statement, maybe.
But a good one. Good summary of discussion.
What was more of a question? I guess, does anyone kind of have anything on that, or, you know, been in a situation where you've seen that you've got frustrated about something because of you're expecting it to be one way, but it's actually the other?
Well, on the topic of... Oh, go ahead, Will.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. On the topic of expectations, like today I was reading my neuropsychology book, and apparently, like, unexpected rewards are more pleasurable than rewards that you expected. And the same goes for punishments. So your expectations even play into how much joy you get from an achievement or some kind of reward, which I just thought was cool.
That's right. Is surprise, I think, is really interesting in causing kind of these big emotional swings one way or the other, depending on the outcome of the surprise. This is something that I was really interested in about, and it kind of is what gives music its element, because it gives you a degree of expectation, so you can count. After this many beats, you can start clicking in, if you know what I mean. Most people, once they've heard a pattern 3 times, will be able to clap that same pattern again and again. So you get that expectation, and then music breaks it. You set up it, and then you break it into somewhere else, and you get this surprise spike. And yeah, it's very good for emoting different reactions one way or the other. And it's interesting because it seems to be, you can kind of see how it evolutionarily came about. Because, you know, if you're surprised that a tiger is suddenly in your face, although it's been walking towards you for some time, then you need to kind of worry and move about, or I don't know, actually, sorry. I don't know where that was going. But yeah, it's an interesting topic, surprise and expectation, and the challenge for me seems to be managing and setting expectations in a certain way. And I don't know, it's tough, because basically expectations, if they let you down, they really hurt us. But if they're good, if they are true, then they really, really help us. So it's not so much a case, for me, I think, of not having expectations, of just going with the flow. Is of trying to manage what I make my expectations with, which is this set, to try and be more like reality. And you do that through learning, experience, that kind of stuff. That's why I'm here. Why I think most of us are here.
Who was it that discussed that book about the cat system, Stranger or something? Was that Will or Gabriel?
It was Mario, I think.
That said
You're thinking of Stranger in a Strange Land. It's a sci-fi novel by Robert Heinlein.
Stranger in a Strange Land.
Yeah.
It's a fiction?
Yeah, science fiction.
Hmm.
I have well, it's a totally different topic, I suppose, so I should save that for maybe after we're done recording, but I have a question about that. We still have time.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have time. We've gone through the second 2 questions now out of 4. If anyone has any more on kind of expectations and sets, speak up now or we'll move on. Silence in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's go. So the next one was another one by me. This is a really good little bit, which he says, and I'm really having to try and internalize this because I'm not there yet. But he says that when you go into a mental institution, you see someone pissing on your leg or something like that, you realize that they're sick. And basically we need to start taking that mentality and putting it towards everyone. And seeing basically any behavior they're doing is this kind of sick, as in it's not their control, as in no free will, essentially. So, and stop blaming people for the way that they behave and actually working on them and helping to improve them. I think I've generally got this down, but I'm having terrible trouble trying to explain this to people, especially talking about criminals and like serial killers. People can just at the moment can't understand that forces could change someone to do that, if you know what I mean. I'm just wondering whether you guys have kind of talked about maybe the criminal justice system in terms of seeing people as sick rather than judging people.
Yes.
Well, if I can just say something quickly, I think the criminal system, like Jack said, is probably 98% of it is caused by people having lack of money or just trying to pay their bills, so they steal or whatever. Now, if that's a sick mind, I don't know. But maybe in the future we'll just have to work on the 2% of actually being sick people, because I don't really know if the laws are saying everything for all of the criminals, that they're all sick. I don't think they're all sick. That's my thought.
It's this society that's sick, that produces criminals and crime and all this crap that we call criminal justice system. It is in fact that it's criminal. It's a criminal system that produces criminals. In fact, I mean, I look at prisons as like crime factories. I mean, you put a bunch of people from scarcity-based environments in there, and they become more like that. And then release them back out into the world, or not, keep them there too. Either way, it's disgusting.
Or they're using words. Sorry, they're using words like correctional institution.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing. Even if you correct people, but then release them back into the same conditions, it's like if you have a pet, or some say you find a wounded animal, you nurse it back to health. It's now adapted to your environment. You release it into the natural environment, and it's less adapted. It's more adapted to your environment now. So
often people end up in a worse situation. Will, go on. You've been wanting to say something for that.
Yeah. Well, in America, I know that the vast majority of those imprisoned are African Americans who are guilty of very minor marijuana-related crimes. And that makes up the very vast majority of the prison population. And I actually know somebody who's been through this, and It's just kind of a series of hoops that they like put hoops in front of the person that give them the illusion of choice, and then they kind of like force them to do these certain things that then first and foremost profit the prison industry, because it's all privatized in America. So it's a private corporation that's imprisoning the people, and then these corporations then bribe the judges that push these cases through to make sure that more and more people are imprisoned. And then when somebody actually does go through the system, then they have this charge on their record that means that they no longer can get an entry-level job. And being unable to get an entry-level job then forces them into actual crimes such as theft, etc. And then where do they end up? Back in the prison system, and a cycle repeats. It just gets worse every time.
And that's it. People come out often in like in the worst environment than they went in. Like, what would happen to your house and stuff? I don't really look into it, but say I had a house and I had a mortgage and then I got sent in jail for 5 years. Does my house stop getting paid, or what? Like, you come out, are you then homeless? This kind of stuff. It almost erodes your environment whilst you're away. But I think for me, okay, this is what I'm trying to explain to people. I seem to have a problem with, which is, say, serial killers, people who do sadistic shit, kill like 10 people, do like skin their faces, anything like this. People go, well, I could see how you could kill someone through something or other, but this has gone through such a mental process that, why haven't they stopped themselves at 100 steps before this point? Therefore, they deserve to die, that kind of thing. And like, this is the example that I use. I don't know if any of you guys have seen Robert Sapolsky's lecture series on YouTube about behavioral biology. He has a good example in there where he was there was a serial killer who was on trial in somewhere in America, and basically they realized that most of his frontal cortex had been blown out in some sort of industrial accident or something like that. And basically, this is the bit that stops inhibition, that provides inhibition, that stops you doing horrible stuff, and like basically the filter between the crazy stuff that we all think and then what we actually do. And it's been proven that basically people without this kind of don't have that filter, and you can go out and very easily do this kind of horrible stuff. So that's a real physical condition. But the juries decided to execute this guy. And I don't see how anyone could. Well, I do. I mean, I tell that to people, and they still don't understand what I'm trying to get across. So I was just wondering whether you guys had a better example or something along that lines. I don't know.
Yeah, so our society, I feel like, really conditions us not to care about what people's personal problems are. So if somebody has a mental disorder like that, then we don't care that they have that mental disorder. The only thing we care about is, whatever our law says. And that's one of the real sicknesses that we face.
You're right.
And a relevant quote that Sapolsky had too is something that I actually used when trying to get out of jury duty. Was he said something like, "The criminal justice system is incompatible with modern science," meaning in terms of his understanding of things. How he understands. We behave according to our environments, and what we're doing is punishing people for the environments that they had no choice in growing up in, basically. And then expecting them to somehow get better because of that, and reintroducing them into the society that is this terrible fucking cyclical thing. So yeah, that's how I interpret his quote, but it's a good quote.
I think at the same time we have this assumption that like normal people that fit into society are healthy, when I think another good quote is that like you can't. It's like if you accommodate yourself to an insane society, then you're insane. The sane become the mad. I can't remember where I heard that, but if you're if you fit into this crazy society, then obviously you're not the healthiest person you could be.
And like you can see that examples over the years. Schizophrenia is a disease that has gone all over the place, and the word has been used for basically anyone who doesn't conform in numerous different situations around the world. Like it's starting to get proper down to a proper well-explained disease now, but it's the same with, I guess it's the same opening premise. What is sick? And if we're calling sick, unacceptable to the general environment or something, then we have a larger question, at hand. So I guess when Jacques says, go out and see everyone is sick, that's from where we could be point of view, from what Jacques saying, where we could be in a resource-based economy point of view, everyone is sick. But to a normal person, the sick person is the one who doesn't follow what they've been told is normal. So getting into words not being understandable again. That's cool. All right. Anything else on crime or sickness?
I guess, in terms of, how Jacques talked briefly about how we view people, he said it's if someone hurts you, it's more sane or evolved to feel sorry for them rather than to retaliate. But even more so than that, I mean, really, feeling sorry for them doesn't solve anything either. I think, we were talking about, the word brotherly. I try not to look at people as sick or judge people in terms of bad or criminal or sick or whatever, all these different categorizations. I feel like looking at them as all brotherly is a more like you said there, but for the grace of God go I, that whole thing. It's relevant, valid, and yeah.
So there was something that I wanted to share with you guys during this meeting. It's a bit of reading that I found. I think it's very relevant to what we're talking about, the subject matter. Does anybody know who Edward Bernays is?
Yes.
Yeah, pioneer, douchebagger.
Oh.
Gabriel, you broke up on me there.
I was just saying I do think I know who he is. He's a pioneer in propaganda.
That's the one. So this is his book, Propaganda, that talks a lot about how modern marketing works, and it's kind of like the Bible for marketing. So, and I thought it was really relevant to this conversation because these are the sorts of things that are influencing these value systems that we have, and I think it's important to be aware of the mechanism of how that works.
And the interesting thing with, say, Bernays is that the method seems to work. And so we need to start using this method for our own, you know what I mean? Like, I watched the documentary. Have you guys seen The Century of the South? Where it, 4-part BBC documentary where it goes over basically his life and things, and you come away with it going, oh my God, Bernays, you ruined us all. And, obviously stuff that happened wasn't great. Propagandizing women into smoking, for instance, was horrible. All this kind of thing. But it's valid techniques, and so I think there's a lot for us to learn from this kind of stuff. As much as we might morally object to the way it's been done in the past. It's a technology, I guess. Like everything else, it's how we use it. So maybe I need to look into it again and read this book.
Yes, that's one of the other reasons I wanted to share, because it is a technology, and while propaganda has gotten a bad name, especially for things like cigarettes or going to war and things like that, the truth is that what propaganda actually is, and Edward Bernays talks about this a bit in his book, is that it's the ability of a group to influence a larger group. And that's not just marketing, but there are a number of different things that go into that. And if you have an understanding of some of these things, then it can help us out a lot.
Great, well thanks for sharing. I've just downloaded that. I'll definitely give that a read. So do you want to go on to Michael's question?
Sure, it wasn't really a question, I guess more, again, an observation, but talking about values, I mean, they seem to exist only in our heads, and really what we're always talking about is behavior. Our values don't, I guess one could say they literally don't matter, in terms of you could have, like Jock said, you've got a perfect set of values in your head, but if your environment doesn't allow you to behave that way, then what does it matter? So again, behavior and values are linked, interrelated, interdependent, but again, it's all environment. Change the environment, you change both values and behavior.
I guess, the perfect value system is that a value system which perfectly fits the environment, or perfectly fits your needs. It's tough. How do we change the environment?
Technology and information seem to be, science and technology, that's what we're talking about really. Either if you change someone's information, that's kind of like what we're limited to, because we can't physically change our environment at the moment because we don't have the resources or money or whatever you want to say. We're kind of limited to changing people's information because that's what we have to do, but ultimately it's weaker. It's a weaker method than changing the physical reality. It's kind of changing our internal realities so that hopefully we can create enough people to manifest this change that will eventually change the physical reality or environment, whatever you want to say. Does that sound right?
So what was the question? New educational environment. Well, in a way, Venus Project is trying to change the environment. They're trying to do it through releasing documentaries, releasing films. Then that is a way to efficiently try and change or get out into and flood the environment of, let's say, YouTube, with more relevant information. Try and gain supporters that can then spread the word and do this kind of stuff. But yeah, at the moment, I guess we are kind of limited to an intellectual change that we're trying to do in people, which is kind of education. Let's see. I would say probably the test city, and actually their research center they've already got now is an attempt to try and start changing the environment. Except to say the research center it can only support those two at the moment, and it's still kind of based on donations and things. So it's not a full change, but it's trying to edge that. Richard said, is environment linked to culture? Yes. Let's say this. You can't have a scuba diving culture in the Sahara. That kind of thing, to a large extent, does shape the culture, and yeah.
I'd say, they're interrelated, or to some extent, culture is environment, or you could say it's part of it. Yeah, it's a relevant factor. I mean, what is an environment? Our bodies are an environment that are, products of other environments. Everything's an environment in a sense. And yeah, culture is kind of a certain way of looking at environment. It's a limited interpretation of it, I suppose. It's part of it, yeah. And yeah, about Gabriel's comment, I don't know, flooding YouTube with good content. I mean, yeah, flooding is one way. I don't know. Is flooding necessarily the best strategy, or do you want a little bit of really good quality stuff? I don't know. Different strategies, more than one way to skin a cat, but yeah, I don't know. Right now, I guess that's what we're doing.
Yeah, it depends. Like,
until we find better strategies or solutions.
well, say flooding YouTube with good content. To me, it's the same, or almost similar to, say the Venus Project decided to sponsor the World Cup, the Football World Cup or something, and there's, around the pitch they had Venus Project logos and things all the way around. Like, it's a way to flood the environment, I guess. Not although different cases, I guess, in that YouTube links you have to go and specifically focus on that. It's not periphery. So maybe that's not quite a good comparison.
Yeah, it seems like a strategy based on the current environment or strategy of flooding the market with all this bullshit, and we're kind of constantly trying to compete with that and trying to counter indoctrinate people, I suppose, in a sense, unindoctrinate them.
And I guess the question is it more efficient to do that with our own indoctrination, like counter indoctrination, or to try and find a tool above that supersedes that system, which is tough. And I think that's what we're trying to do here with, say, the local meetings that I set up in the UK and things. We have hangouts very much like these guys. These ones we go through Trom site and things like that. And it's not so much broad range indoctrination, but it's more specific, in-depth, allowing people to come to us. At the hope, I guess, that supersedes the system of broader indoctrination that people just go through every day in their lives. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What?
And in another sense too, I see the flooding as a good thing. I mean, the floodgates have been open, I suppose, because of things like the internet and communication technology and all this stuff. So yeah, it's if you look at it from that perspective, it's progress.
What about ways that our message intersects with the existing propaganda machine?
That's a great question. I feel like it doesn't have to. I feel like these perceptions that people have that like a resource-based economy or the Venus Project is counter to the established interests it's understandable where that interpretation comes from, but really I see all of our interests as fundamentally the same, and what the system does is improves their quality of life as well. They just don't necessarily see it that way or understand it that way. So again, seeing us all as equal, even the caste system, even the people at the very top, not necessarily equal in socioeconomic terms, but equal in behavioral biology, terms, things like that. And we are all very fundamentally similar.
So you're like wondering what the dominant mythos would say about the Venus Project and what we do, because we could think about like what a news broadcast, like a local news or a CNN kind of news story would say about us, and I think it would. I'm afraid they might use some kind of form of the word cult or something and try to like make it seem like we're crazy and fringe and something like that, which would be really destructive.
Yeah.
it's the same.
Okay, so maybe I didn't say that clearly. I don't feel like I communicated my idea effectively. So what I was trying to get at is that a lot of times the dominant news media already says things that we agree with in many, many cases. Even news outlets that many of us don't like I personally can't stand Fox News. But watching Fox News the other day, I remember at least 10 points that they went across that really, really meshed well. But I guess what my question was is, how do you think that we could get these happy coincidences to work for us better?
Just by realizing them, in a sense, I feel like you recognizing that is a step. That was a step for me too. I'd always thought that Fox was completely a certain way, and then I saw some things and I was like, okay, so they can be honest, or they can say correct or more correct things at times, and it's not 100% bullshit. It's the same thing with every other group. I mean, we're conditioned to just look at the differences and how things aren't really. Yeah, we're trying to see the differences instead of the similarities and focus on those. And yeah, so seeing it in a new way like that, it opens you up to being able to communicate with people who do watch Fox or who do have that value system. And so it increases your abilities in that way, I suppose.
All right. How about I don't know. Have any of you guys seen the ongoing row between Fox and Russell Brand? Basically, he's kind of descending into name calling. Anyone seen this, or am I on my own?
I don't pay too much attention to mainstream media and controversy and all that bullshit.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure if it really is in mainstream anymore. Russell Brand created his own Trues YouTube channel, which is True News every day, and basically, I'm saying him because he's more along the lines of us than anything else out there, and he's got this kind of pop figure. And I don't know, if we haven't talked about it, I was just going to wonder whether he's going about, because he's kind of attacking Fox in the way that they're trying to point out how they are manipulating people, but without going against, really insulting the guy too much. And I was just wondering whether you guys thought that was, he's been doing it well or he's been basically doing it wrong, but if we haven't seen it, I'll shut up. That's fine.
Yeah, I see that as kind of a negative strategy in the long run. I mean, attacking another value system or institution or whatever you want to call it isn't as productive as promoting your own, I feel, more positive one, right?
Let's see. I don't know, it's part of this. He's in the stage where he's trying to wake people up. He's trying to educate them about how they're propagandizing and stuff. And yeah, it kind of descended, and yeah, it wasn't very well thought out, I didn't think, but it's possibly needed for people to see that before they can then, you got to see the failings of what you're going through before you can move out into something better, I think.
Yeah, I understand the strategy, and I see the value in it, I suppose, for some people, but it is off-putting to other people. So again, you can't please everybody, I guess. But to me, I see it as being more valid and useful with data and evidence and statistics and information, science, all that stuff, showing people that instead of saying, that's bullshit, that's bullshit, that's bullshit. Don't do that. Don't listen to them. Don't listen to that. It's you're going to be doing that a lot because there's a lot of bullshit. So just instead of that, if people do value that, it's more beneficial to you to say, yeah, that's great, but like Jock says, but it doesn't go far enough. So again, if you can understand that there are people who do value that, and basically know your audience. Yeah, if you're talking to a bunch of people who hate Fox, then you can say, yeah, Fox sucks. But if you're talking to people who do value it and they're defending it, then to be adaptable and say, yeah, no, I have seen some good stuff on there. It's, yeah, but this is better. Like this source of information, like Trom you mentioned, or obviously Jock and Jeremy Rifkin and all these other brilliant people that we're talking about. Focus on those better sources of information, not just denigrating the shitty ones that we know are all out there.
That's good, thanks. Right, did we have any more on that? Or was it Michael, you had another thing that was for after the recording or whatever?
So,
yeah. Oh, go ahead.
You sort of mentioned factual-based argument strategy, and that does work for a certain group of people. But a lot of people that I talk to, as soon as I mention the word fact, scientist, study, or sometimes even the word information, they just kind of tune out. And I was wondering what kind of strategies you guys had adapted for that.
I'd say don't talk first, listen. Before you start using your words, I'd say use the words that they use, because people really are talking about the same things, they just have different words for them. So, if someone doesn't like whatever words you're using, then kind of if they've used a similar word, then or whatever their value system or vocabulary is, then try and adapt to that. It's more effective. Because yeah, you're going to be talking about a lot of stuff that people either don't understand or don't have the reference for.
All right, see you, Richard. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, and I'm with you there. Sorry.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, he's actually.
Yeah,
I'm definitely with you there, Michael. The problem that I run into is time-based issues of I just don't have enough to put into a person to really figure out where they're at, or well, not actually being there with the person. I sometimes like talking to people when I'm not face to face, especially like Facebook comments or trying to have a conversation with someone over YouTube comments or something like that. I've found really tricky, and I've essentially tried to avoid doing that at all costs now, mainly because I cannot understand, the body language of what they're saying. So I assume they're being sarcastic and flippant and they're trying to piss me off when they're really not, or something like that. So those are just challenges that I've had. But you're definitely right of trying to figure out where they're at. And I think for me, realizing if I don't have time to really figure out where they're at, to kind of jump ship before I get too emotionally invested.
But really, I mean, we're kind of talking about one-timing it, like talking about, talking to one person at a time or a small group of people, but, really, which is how we grow, and it's how we start. You start with one, and then you get bigger and learn. But really, we've got to do it more en masse. That's why these documentaries and movies are being talked about, because they're reaching more people simultaneously. More efficient strategy, I feel. But in the meantime, do what you can. Yeah, if you want to talk to people and all that, then do it.
Yeah, these larger strategies take a lot more finesse and skill to execute properly.
They do. More information, resources, time, all that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's time for me to dip out. I think I needed to leave at like 3. So great discussion, everybody. Thanks. See you later.
Thank you. Always good seeing you guys.
All right. Do you have any more on that? No, I guess we can go on to your additional question. Did you want it on the recording, or did you want me to stop beforehand? I don't mind, keep going. Sorry, Michael, I was talking to you.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yeah, you had another point earlier, which you said wasn't quite relevant.
Oh, yeah, it was related to someone, they were talking about science fiction, and I feel like there's nothing inherently wrong with it. I'm not against it. It's just I feel that science fact is more valuable, more effective, like actual science. Again, that's kind of an arbitrary distinction, but there it is. I didn't know if anyone else had similar thoughts or agreed. Or
No, that's an interesting point. Because our brain does not really make a distinction between reality and the events that we see on TV. We might consciously make that decision in our daily life. However, on a more subconscious level, we really kind of see those things as fact. And so things like science fiction actually might have some potential to do harm. Or contrived but ultimately false social interactions on television also may have potential to do some harm. I think that's a very valid point to bring up.
I agree. And the thing there is the potential, because science fiction becomes science fact. It's pretty good. I think it's going that way someday. Anyway, yeah, Terminator stuff, all that things, it is pretty damaging, I'm pretty sure. However, counter that, I would say the one single thing, well, the biggest single factor that led me to the Venus Project was a science fiction series called The Culture Series by Ian M. Banks. And in that series, he's describing, basically, it's an intergalactic society of abundance, where there's no jobs, no work, it's all automated, all this kind of stuff. Not quite resource-based economy. There's lots of, now that I look back at it, there's lots of little niggly things that are all wrong and all this stuff. But it brought about so many good concepts into my mind that when I saw Zeitgeist Addendum and I saw the Venus Project, and I was like, that is the closest thing to the culture. And for years up to this point, reading these books, I'm like, I want to live in the culture. There's no reason why I couldn't. And so, to me, I think that's the biggest thing that led me to it. So it's kind of interesting, I think.
Yeah, I see the value in it in terms of appealing to people who do value fiction. But in another sense, I feel like we're kind of, it perpetuates, again, the misinterpretations that we have a problem with, like with religions. It's open to interpretation in a sense. Like I could say, I love The Matrix, and what it says. It's a very accurate kind of portrayal of things, but other people might not see it that way. And so using it as an example is, sketchy or iffy at best. Whereas if you use, scientific experiments and, things with much more accredited, I suppose, methodology or statistics, data, information that is commonly agreed upon, then that's more relevant and useful. At least that's the way I see it now. But again, I'm not against anyone using science fiction to try and do that. It's just the way I see it.
I think you're right in terms of day-to-day useful information. Real science is obviously better, and to try and say if you're using an example, trying to give an example to someone, it's better to give a real-world example rather than something out of Star Wars. So yeah, it's something Stephen said. I think it was last week, which is that humans seem to be able to pick up more information when it's part of a story, which to me kind of does make a bit of sense. provides a whole storyline, all this kind of thing. But then, if you look at Jacques saying, we don't want Sunny Day in May crap in our science books, how much Sunny Day in May is needed to get the maximum input, or is it none, or is it all? Do we divide them and say that it's very much clear that this is fiction, this is facts? I don't really understand where that's going in terms of literature.
Well, it seems to me like so many people now value and understand science and respect it, its power and what it does, much more so now than ever before. Well, not ever before possibly, but in the general culture that we live in now, yeah, it seems to be growing. And so I feel like, perhaps once maybe science fiction was valued more and more useful, things like Star Trek, getting, ideas out to the mainstream masses who didn't necessarily understand science very well. Whereas now, now that more people do, I feel like, we can transition out of the fiction part and just focus on the science more.
Hmm.
Does that make sense, or does that seem right to other people?
That does make sense. It brings the question of the major motion picture that's been brought about. And let's say Jacques, the first book looking forwards, both would be a work of science fiction by my definition of what science fiction is. Because what it seems like you're saying is, do more future by design, do more factual-based documentary type things, rather than going into this whole emotional storyline and immersive experience, which would be the major motion picture, or say the theme park.
Maybe. I mean, it seems like that appeals to a very specific audience, whereas the things we're talking about, we don't necessarily. Do we want to appeal to people who value fiction, or do we want to appeal to people who are kind of higher up the intellectual chain and understand, more relevant fact, again, science, things like that? I mean, either way, again, it does. Again, that's why it does no good to be against other people's strategies, because then you're just going to spend your time second guessing yourself and second guessing them and kind of shitting on their strategies and ideas when really they're perhaps just as valid as yours, but to a different audience or something like that. So again, it's counterproductive to think about it in those terms and just again focus on our own strategies and directions.
That's cool. I think, like, say through the transition, it needs multiple attacks from all sides, if you know what I mean, to get anyone that's possibly interested, I think, into it. Because we need this larger following, essentially, to really start doing things. My question would maybe be, and I'm sure we've been over this before, but fully in 100, 200 years into a resource-based economy, do you guys see fiction being around anymore? Fiction being around anymore?
Maybe it's pointless in thinking about. It's kind of a hypothetical that may or may not happen, and we. But yeah, it's interesting. I have thought about that.
It's kind of a question that a number of people have asked. Generally, what about arts in the future? What about sports? Things that we kind of see as being, unnecessary. Or there's better alternatives to them, maybe. I don't know.
Well, it's hard to say. Maybe pointless to think about, but yeah, it's interesting. I've thought about that too.
All right, cheers. There's the answer. We don't know.
Cool. Well, either way, anything else?
Nothing from me. Will Murray?
No, I just found it really interesting, and yeah, I don't really have anything to add about whether fiction will be in the future, but like, I know right now people do find it really important, and as well like art, imagination. Outside of religious circles, a lot of people are into mysticism, like myself, where we believe that the greatest scientists in the history of humanity have been mystics. I know that can be argued and debated, but there's books written upon those subjects, so it's still like a mainstream bias that's there for people to pick up on if they want to. I just guess like what was earlier said, when we use semantics and label different things that people are doing differently and talking the people's languages is really important. Finding out how to market and how to communicate with a wide variety of people that's not just your social clique or your people who you're regularly in contact with is very important if you want to be spreading messages and communicating to an international audience. Realizing that just because you're right and just because you know better doesn't mean that you can use that. I hate seeing it myself when I see some people suddenly in a position and they think that they're so much better and so holier than people who are coming in to see them because they've got some PhD in position in society, when a lot of the times I see the people who are going to see them way more innovative, way more creative, got way more energy and tenacity. So like I think we should take that on as well, like realizing it doesn't matter how educated we become in the Venus Project and the resource-based economy, to always have that humility and realize that people do have insightful ideas, doesn't matter where they derive from, their age or religion or culture, and that if we can embrace them and empower them, that maybe like they can teach us something that not that we didn't understand or that we didn't get studied in or educated in, that we just have never heard before because it's from this individual and it's from their perspective. And so I just think like there is a lot of real world education, a wealth of knowledge that people walk around with, and just because they're not scientific and just because they may believe in pseudoscience from our perspective doesn't mean that they should be written off. And because sometimes, like I've read a lot on science, and a lot of times the scientist will start out as a religious person, and through their discovery and education, they have switched it up, and then they've become innovators and worldwide celebrities in science history because of their scientific discoveries and contributions to the scientific community. So we should never like write people off because of their current belief systems. But yeah, that's just my little bit of feedback anyway.
Yeah, I wouldn't write off anyone. It's just, you can only focus on one thing at a time, basically, or certain people, and some of them just, are more, or better for you to focus on personally. I also found another quote here on the subject before we go, since Sky just joined us. On the subject of values, I found this great quote of Jock's that I always liked. When we go from one culture to another, when Americans go to Sweden or China, they compare China with our system. They can't do that. They have to remember that in China, people have a different value system. The Arab world has a different value system, and we can't communicate with each other as long as we believe our values are real rather than environmentally determined. Pretty good.
That's good. Cool. Well, I think I'll stop the broadcast there. Yep, thanks for everyone for coming and participating. Sky, thanks for joining. And everyone for watching. So